Hello and welcome to Prince Albert's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation virtual event. My name is Nicole Mathis. I am the Assistant Coordinator at Communities Building Youth Futures, Prince Albert.
And my name is Cameron Corgle, and this is the first year that September 30th is being acknowledged as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which you may also know is Orange Shirt Day.
This event is hosted by the Prince Albert Urban Indigenous Coalition in partnership with Communities Building Youth Futures Prince Albert, also known as CBYF. Thank you for joining along today as we honor those impacted by residential schools and affirm and reaffirm our commitment to truth and reconciliation and calls to action.
The Prince Albert Urban Indigenous Coalition, PAYAC, was formed in 2017 through a participatory process. There are 80 plus Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations and community members who come together to share information, heal and reconcile, and address the unique challenges in Prince Albert.
Through the collaborative efforts of PAYAC, another coalition known as the Community Networking Coalition, and the community at large, a new youth-focused organization was created. Communities Building Youth Futures, CBYF-PA, has an aspirational vision of a community that works together with youth as the center of our focus, where all members play an important role in supporting our youth and building a brighter future for our community, where youth feel connected and supported in determining and achieving their own versions of success, and a community where we are all proud of. At CBYF, we want to bring the community together to collaborate using a collective impact approach to achieve this vision.
We would like to start off by acknowledging that we are in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, which is located on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis.
We are grateful for this opportunity to meet here. We pay our respects to the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this land. We reaffirm our relations with one another and our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our community.
We would like to welcome Janet Carrier, co-host of the Prince Albert Urban Indigenous Coalition and the Executive Director for the Prince Albert Indian and Métis Friendship Center. She will be sharing opening remarks on behalf of PAYAC and the Friendship Center.
Hello everyone, my name is Janet Carrier. I'm a co-host of the Prince Albert Urban Indigenous Coalition, and today we are bringing you an educational video event. I would like to acknowledge the land that I am in today. I am in Treaty 6 territory, which is also home to the Métis and the Dakota people, and I would like to thank the people of Treaty 6 for allowing us to live and work on their land. Thank you. Today is called a National Truth and Reconciliation Day. It was formerly called Orange Shirt Day. And as you watch the videos today, you will learn and get to understand the significance of the orange shirt, how it came about, and what it means. I would like you to take this opportunity to learn as much as you can so that in the spirit of reconciliation, we can all move forward in a good way. With that, I would like to thank you for watching today and ask that you just sit back, relax, and enjoy the event that we have for you.
Thank you so much, Janet. Next, we have Linda O'Soup from the Prince Albert Indian and Métis Friendship Center, who will be sharing the history of Orange Shirt Day.
Hi there, my name is Linda O'Soup. I'm a resolution health support worker at the Prince Albert Indian Métis Friendship Center, and I'm here today to talk about Orange Shirt Day. And so I'd like to introduce the book, The Orange Shirt Story by the author Phyllis Webstad. And this is her true story of her experience in residential school in British Columbia. And so the story begins that she was turning 6, and her grandmother took her to town, and they bought an orange shirt. And she was so excited to wear this orange shirt on her first day at school. And so she got taken away to the residence, which was 2 hours away and furthest place that she's ever been from her home. And so while she was here, she was so excited to come here because she got to spend time with her cousins and she wanted to see what school is like. And so her grandmother took her and they bought this orange shirt. And so she was so excited and she wore this orange shirt the first day. And when she got to the residence, well, she was taken and she was given a bath and her hair was cut and the orange shirt was taken away. And as much as she wanted that orange shirt, it was never given back to her. She never did see it again. And so began her experience in residential school. And for the first year, she counted down. She said her cousin told her it was going to be 300 sleeps. And so she survived the first year and she counted down, and fall turned to winter, winter to spring, and the numbers got smaller and smaller. And at the end of the year, she was able to go home. She was able to go be back with her grandmother. But like many of the young children, they never did return back home. And so today we honor these children that went to residential schools, and we remember the ones who never made it back. And so that's the story of Orange Shirt Day. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda, for sharing why we wear orange shirts on this day. Up next, we will hear a message about Orange Shirt Day from Eugene Arkand, a residential school survivor and advisor with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Indian Residential School Survivor Committee.
Danse. Asay mina, naskumano, kamamo tibitsigit. Otong abkaki upito taigwak. Ego minange. Geteo. Kagi opinachi guspagan, kiksepa. Wista omin naskumao. Ego kakio muuta kaktabahtamek, tamskat na kakio. First, we thank the Creator today for bringing us all together on Orange T-shirt Day. September has always been a very rough month for all of us. And today, September 30th, I'm joyful that that month is over. And the reason for that is during this month, we are torn away every year from our families to have to go back into these institutions and experience the daily threat of physical, sexual, psychological, and emotional abuse. September 30th, September is gone. Let's all move on. When you get home today, please hug your mom, hug your father, hug your siblings. Tell them you love them, because you have no idea what it's like to go through a childhood never having been told you're loved. Kakiog naskump no, aksanma. Hi.
Thank you, Eugene, for your words. Next, we are excited to share with you the orange t-shirt design, which was designed by one of our local youth here in Prince Albert. Ayla Carpenter has created an Orange Shirt Day, Every Child Matters, design uniquely for Prince Albert. Ayla is a young Indigenous artist that has called Prince Albert home for the past 7 years. The shirts feature an artist's design flying back home on the front. The design, as described by the artist, is Flying Back Home is a design for Orange Shirt Day, which shares a message of hope in 4 parts. 1 is hope in the form of strength, shown with the eagle feathers. 1 is hope in endless purpose, represented with the stars. 1 is hope following change, represented in the life cycle of a butterfly. And 1 is hope in the form of future generations, presented in the child who stand united. This design is for everyone that has been impacted by residential schools. With every step we make to honor our lost loved ones, we are bringing our ancestors home. Ayla's design is absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Ayla, for your amazing work.
We will now be hearing from Mariah Martin, who is a residential school survivor. This is her story.
Hanin Boshu, I was asked to come and talk about my experience and story of my residential school. I come from Treaty 3 territory in Kenora, Ontario, and I went to residential school in the 60s and 70s. My first experience in residential school was when I was 5 years old. I'm also part of the 60 Scoops, and I remember the day I entered residential school. My foster parents at that time got me ready, and they informed me that I would go to a special school. I got dressed. They dressed me up. I had pigtails. I had this beautiful velvet red dress with white sprinkles on top, and I was excited that I was going to this special school that they talked about. So we went to St. Mary's School in Kenora, which was located on Rat Portage Reserve. I was so amazed at how big the school was when we drove up, and I was so fascinated on how the school was going to be. And we entered the school. Nuns came and greeted us, and my parents said goodbye to me, and then they left. And the nuns took me. One of the nuns put their hands on my shoulders and sort of squeezed my hand, squeezed my shoulder, and fear set in for me at that moment. And they took me downstairs. They stripped me. They bathed me, put this stuff in my head that burnt, and they cut my hair. And that was how my fears started. So I met my oldest sister there. She is 6 years older than me, and she was in the big girls section. And I went, and then just after they washed me up and scrubbed me down and put a uniform on me, I gave me a number. And for some reason, 41 sticks in my head. I don't know which school I had that number, but we were known as numbers. We didn't have names in the school. We were numbers. And 41 has always been stuck in my head all these years. So they dressed me in this uniform. One of the nuns took me down the hill. They were the bigger girls. They were swimming, and that's when I first met my sister. And I was excited to see her. I remember trying to show her my change that I had in my little change purse. And I can remember bits and pieces of it. I was 5 years old at the time. And I remember this one incident that when she showed me who my brother was a year older than me, who just passed away this year in May. He was in the boys section. We weren't allowed to talk to the boys. We weren't allowed to play with them. And I remember standing at a fence, and she pointed him out to me and told me that was my brother. And that's how I met my brother for the first time. At supper time, we weren't allowed to talk. We had to stay in our sections. The abuse for me started, I don't remember when, but I remember those footsteps. It was the priest that sexually abused us. He picked and chose who he was gonna fondle or touch during the night. It was night that he would walk around in the dorm. We had our dorms where there was beds in rows, and there was bunk beds. And I remember when we heard that door open, everybody would be quiet. And I remember being under my blanket and thinking, listening to those footsteps walking, and thinking that he won't touch me tonight. He won't touch me tonight. We just listened to those footsteps and where they were going, where they were going to stop, and he would pick and choose which girls he was going to fondle or whatever. And today I have a big issue with being intimate with my partners. I don't like people touching my legs, rubbing my legs. I don't like people rubbing my back. And over the years I wondered where that came from. I didn't, I've been married twice, and both my marriage had broken down because of it. And when I started working on my residential school issues, I know why that is. And even my children today remember telling me that, you never let that hold you. I remember you never let that hold you, and my kids are grown adults now. And that's what residential school, how it affects us. And growing up, I had a lot of anger, which I brought into my adult life. And I had a lot of anger towards my parents. My dad died when I was 9 years old. And I'll go back a little bit. And the priest used to, when he would fondle us, he would sit by our bed and he would rub our legs and he would just like shh, shh. And I remember one night I bled one night, so the next morning I remember throwing my underwear in the garbage, and one of the bigger girls that were there gave me her panties so I can change, and I threw mine away. And in our language, and we weren't allowed to speak our language, we only spoke our language when there was nobody around, when we were in the bathroom, or when we were taking showers, or when we were outside where the nuns weren't around. We would speak our language. And it was like people knew what was happening. Everybody knew what went on in the school, but we weren't allowed to. We didn't speak about it. We just left it, and it was because we were just little girls. And today I still have, when I see a priest with a little white collar or a nun, I go back to that little girl back in residential school. Fear kicks in right away, anger kicks in. But today I've done a lot of healing in my journey, and I'm responsible to what that little girl does when things trigger me today. I do get triggered. My healing that I've done, I've learned to be able to recognize the fact that I am somebody, and I mean something to people. So I hold on to that and I walk with that, and I know today that it wasn't our fault, the abuse that happened in those schools, physical, sexual, mentally. But what we do with it today is what's going to make a difference for our children and grandchildren going forward. Today I watch my children all battle, like they all battled with addictions. I battled with addictions over the years. I was very fortunate too that I was, my last foster home that I was in, the last 10 years of my life, being until I was of age. My mom gave me values and morals to walk with today. And because of her, I didn't fall prey to addictions and drugs. I knew enough not to fall into that. But I also, you can shake my family tree and that's all that falls out. You know, I watch my biological family. They've all suffered through child abuse, and they've all, you know, I watched them, you know, we've lost 4 of them. And there's 3 of us left. My younger brother, I know, is suffering. I don't know his experience when he was in the foster care system, but I know it's affected him in a negative way. My oldest sister, like I said, she's 6 years older than me. She doesn't talk about any of that stuff. I was just there in May when we put our brother to rest, and she still wouldn't talk about it today. So it affects all of us, but like I said, it helps us. We have to educate the people that don't know what happened in these schools, and we're living proof of that. And like I said, I've come a long way from where I was, and I'm very fortunate to work in a place where there's a lot of caring people in my workplace. And my workplace is where I can sit and talk to people and be okay with things. Surround yourself with people that care about you, and keep on healing. And that's the only way we're going to make sure that, you know, this doesn't happen to anybody else, to any of our kids. There is the child care welfare system that's still very active in our world, but, you know, in my journey, I've learned to forgive my mom. Like, my parents were also residential school survivors. I didn't know that until I started my position. I'm a resolution health support worker at the Friendship Center, and I came across my mom and dad's records one day. And I remember my boss bringing those papers to my office. And that's the closest I felt to my parents, is that piece of paper. My son has those papers. It was my dad's discharge papers. He was in Macintosh School for 10 years. My mom, I got her, my son has her admission papers. I'm not sure how long she was in residential school. But the second residential school I went to as well is where my mom went. It's called CJ in Cecile Jeffrey Melick in Kenora, Ontario. And when I think about that school, you know, I walked the same hall she did. 7 generations went through residential schools. And the effect that it has on my children today, it doesn't anger me as much as it used to. But it saddens me that my children have to suffer in how I parented them and how I cared for them. But we need to be able to heal enough so our grandchildren don't go through that system ever again. We need to be compassionate with each other, understand each other, and you know, I hear a lot about, you know, just get over it. When people tell me just get over it, are the people that don't know anything about healing. I'm going to leave you with that. Miigwech for listening, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to tell a little bit about my story.
Thank you, Mariah. We now welcome the City of Prince Albert's Mayor, Greg Dion, to share some words about reconciliation in our community.
Hi, I'm Greg Dion, the Mayor of Prince Albert. Today's message is about September 30th and identifying what that day means. It's a day that we have to reflect on our history. Sometimes we don't like doing that, but we have to. I always was taught from my grandfather that, Greg, before you know where you're going, you have to know where you're coming from. And so I encourage people to get out and identify with the day. It's been called Orange Shirt Day. And I like that strictly because people see you're wearing orange, kids wear orange, people would ask you, engage you, why are you wearing orange? So you could explain the significance of the day. But now it's going to be called Reconciliation Day. So we just have to work a little harder to let people know it's about our history. And it's about moving forward, and it's about making things right. And so I encourage people on September 30th to remember what this day is about. It's just not a holiday. It's about remembering our history, even though we don't like it, how sad it was, and how we're going to move forward and how we're going to correct things. That's what this day is about. So I encourage you to celebrate with us on September the 30th. Thank you.
We will now share a video called The Witness Blanket. The Witness Blanket stands as a national monument to recognize the atrocities of the Indian residential school era and honor the children and symbolize ongoing reconciliation. More than 150,000 Indigenous children were forced into residential schools in Canada between 1870 and 1996. Inspired by a woven blanket, this large-scale art installation by Carrie Newman is made from pieces of history. Hundreds of items reclaimed from the residential schools, churches, government buildings, and other cultural structures all across Canada. The following footage is taken from the feature documentary, Picking Up the Pieces: The Making of the Witness Blanket.
Between 1870 and 1996, more than 150,000 Indigenous children were taken from their families and sent to residential schools. Their identities were stolen, cultures extinguished. They were undernourished, neglected, and often abused. There were more than 4,100 confirmed deaths. Did your school have a graveyard? How could this have happened? Where do we go from here? The Witness Blanket, a national monument to recognize the atrocities of the Indian residential school era.
Strewn in the wake of the Indian residential schools are an immeasurable number of broken or damaged pieces. These fragmented cultures, crumbling buildings, segments of language, and grains of diminished pride are often connected only by the common experience that created them. Imagine those pieces, symbolic and tangible, woven together in the form of a blanket. A blanket made from pieces of residential schools, churches, government buildings, and cultural structures. A blanket where the story of each piece is as important to its construction as the wood and screws that hold it together. A blanket with the sole purpose of standing in eternal witness to the effects of the Indian residential school era. The system created and run by churches and the Canadian government to take the Indian out of the child. Left alone, these pieces may be forgotten, lost, buried, or worse, be uncomfortable reminders that leave painful impressions on the minds and hearts of those who recognize what they represent. Individually, they are paragraphs of a disappearing narrative. Together, they are strong and formidable, collectively able to recount for future generations the true story of loss, strength, reconciliation, and pride.
I made this blanket for the survivors. and for the children who never came home, for the dispossessed, the displaced, and the forgotten. I made this blanket for the parents who hold their stories deep inside, afraid of what confronting them might cause in their hearts, afraid of how the truth will affect their children. It is for those who are angry, those in pain, and for those who are working to find their way through, for those who are bitter, and those who remember, and those who have spent a lifetime trying to forget. To forget the braids that were shorn, the heads that were shaved, the dignity that was stolen, and the beatings, abuse, and violation. I made this blanket so that I will never forget. So that we will never forget. It is for the families who have lost their aunts and uncles and sisters and brothers and mothers and fathers and children. For the ones who left us too soon. We have all lost someone too soon. I made this for the communities that were broken, their future scooped up and sent away, never to be the same. Silence replacing the sound of children's laughter. For the victims of violence and the perpetrators of that same violence, some of whom were never taught a better way. We cannot excuse violence, but if we can understand the root of the matter, we can begin to find solutions. For those like me who didn't realize how deeply we were affected until we tried to speak our traditional languages or sing our traditional songs, who didn't know what we didn't know. For those who found, when they had children of their own, they had to learn how to show them love. I love my daughter, my only child, but I was afraid to have a son for fear that I wouldn't know how to relate to him. That is the way it was for many years between me and my father. It is for those of us who spent part of our lives ashamed of our heritage, for those who have yet to learn how to respect themselves for whom they are and for where they are from. I made this for our cultures, our languages, and our traditions that were legislated away, for the governments and churches who tried to take them. It is for the resilience that grasped to those traditions, sustaining them through generations, so that they are now able to flourish again. I made this for anyone who doesn't know what a residential school is, or the truth of what happened there, or the policies and laws that created them. I made this for those who wonder, when are they going to get over it? So that we can have that discussion in earnest and begin to change those perceptions. I made this blanket for the people who want to learn and those who feel guilt, and for those who walk beside us and those who are just now ready to walk beside us. I made this for the conversations still to come, for the lessons we have yet to learn, and for the future we are building together. I made this blanket for hope. I made it for truth. I made it to catch our tears. I made it for reconciliation. I made it for me, and I made it for each of you. In the traditions of my Salish ancestors, it is meant to uplift our spirits, protect us when we are vulnerable, and to honor good work when it is done. It is for our children, and our children's children, and all the generations to come. It is for my daughter. When I think back and remember, at the very beginning, as I sat and thought about what I could do, through all of my ideas and dreams, through the collection of the pieces and the success and failure of the creative process, most of all, in my heart, my truth is that I made this blanket for my father. We need to honor the survivors and remember the children who were lost. We need to speak openly about these stories to ensure that this never happens again.
We asked the youth in Prince Albert to share what truth and reconciliation means to them. Here's what the youth of Prince Albert have to say.
I read an article in 2019 stating that nearly half of Canadians couldn't name a single concentration camp, and that 22% of Canadians hadn't heard of the Holocaust. And so they were calling for Holocaust education to be added to the curriculum. And that just makes me think, like, do Canadians know about residential schools? Can they name a school? And do they know about the torture that happened there? There's the lack of funding, poverty, MMIW, pipelines, and resource extractions in all its forms. There's man camps, brutalization, criminalization, injustice. This is all still being lived today, and it shows that our history is not being acknowledged or repaired. And there needs to be truth before reconciliation. My mom was a survivor, and she battled her trauma her whole life, but she didn't get to overcome it. She passed away in May. Due to alcoholism. Alcoholism caused by that trauma. So residential schools are still killing today, even long after the children have left those institutions. Residential schools brought devastation and trauma to the survivors and intergenerational trauma to the children of those survivors. Our cultures and ceremonies, our languages, our relationships with family, the communities, and the land were severely damaged. The government did everything they could to destroy our people, and they continue to use the tools at their disposal to oppress us. So now they need to do everything they can to assist us in reclaiming our languages and our culture and our land. So reconciliation to me looks like education. You know, this history needs to be taught in schools. And increased funding to increase opportunities for Indigenous people and youth to heal. There needs to be pathways for healing.
Tansei, I'm Cody Michelle. My pronouns are he, him, and I am from the Treaty 6 territory. Truth and reconciliation is important to me as I am a descendant of residential school survivors, and I am committed to reconciliation so that my daughter can grow up in a society where she can be proud of who she is as an Esqueo and know her culture and history.
Hi, my name is Quinn. I'm 18 years old. I live in Treaty 6 territory and trying to do my part in respecting truth and reconciliation. For me, truth and reconciliation is about knowing the truth about the history and experiences of Indigenous people and colonization in Canada. One of the things I'm committed to doing is creating feather paintings to honor the survivors of residential school and the kids who did not survive. My paintings honor my family members who attended the residential school and everyone who was impacted by residential school. This is part of my history and everybody's history. When I paint, I channel the emotions of anger and sadness and hope into my painting. I want everyone to know that every child matters and everyone has a role to play in learning and acting and listening.
So, what does reconciliation mean to me? As an Indigenous person, it's hard for me to answer. For me, it's just a word, a misplaced word. The whole thing is truth and reconciliation, but the focus is more on the reconciliation part when we should be focusing on the truth part. There is no reconciliation without truth. What reconciliation looks like to me is justice for everyone, like MMIW, the kids, every Indigenous person deserves justice, and it's also land back. That's it. I spoke my piece. I'm done.
We will now be hearing from Florence Allen, who is a residential school survivor. She will be sharing her story with us, as well as what reconciliation means to her and the future of the community.
Both my parents went to residential school. I had 2 sisters and a brother. And by the time it was time for me to go, we left the reserve because my dad couldn't get a job on the reserve at that time. Times were hard, so we left the reserve. But we experienced the intergenerational impact of residential school through loss of language, because that was our first language, was Cree. And when my dad, I'll talk a lot about my dad. When my dad went to residential school, that's all he knew was his language. And needless to say, he suffered at the hands of those that were supposed to look after him in the residential school at Sturgeon Landing. That's where I was born. And he couldn't speak his language, and he was an orphan, so he suffered at the hands of the priests and the brothers and the nuns. And experience there for a lot of the students were horrific. And my 2 sisters went to day school because we lived there, and my brother. But my dad was from Pelican Narrows, and they sent him to Sturgeon Landing to go to school. So there was that loss of language, and the connection to our grandmothers and our aunties and uncles, because in the wintertime was story time and getting together and making things. The guys went hunting for small game or big game, whatever was needed. But and we lost ceremonies. We lost a lot of teachings, but my parents used a lot of the parenting skills from their parents. So it was always kind and gentle, and nobody yelled at you. But when they went to school, that was just the complete opposite. And they suffered physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. So as an orphan, he couldn't run away from that. And that's where the addictions come in to mask the abuse with a lot of our people. And how we teach one another is through observation and role modeling. And when you go to school, that's not how it is. There's a teacher up there that will teach you, and it's very impersonal. And if you don't catch on you either go in a corner or, and this was regular school in a small community. And if something went wrong between two people, it was always the Indigenous person that got blamed for it, so, or got strapped for it, or got punished in some way. So, and all those losses that our parents couldn't pass on was such a big loss, because both sides of the family were medicine people. So I had to go out and look for it. And teachers came to teach me how to work with medicines. So there was that loss there. And that connection to the land. We were lucky in Sturgeon Landing because we spent summers out on the land by a lake while my dad worked close by. And there was a lot of affection that was lost too, and from the parents, because they loved their children very much, but through the punishments that they got received at residential school, it left such a big mark on them. So when I was 11, no, when I was 9, I contracted TB and I ended up in, the sanatorium. And, so I knew what it was like to be scooped out of the home and put in a sanatorium away from your parents. So I had a little idea about what they went through, but not the physical abuse and all the other traumas that they received there, because they got rotten food too, and they starved a lot. So we never wasted our food. When you ate, you only took a small amount. And if you needed to eat some more, if you were still hungry, you could go get some more food. But they knew what it was like to go hungry, so they were very conscientious, because they said there's probably somebody out there that's very hungry, so you can't waste food. So there's always the teachings that they got from, I should say, as harsh as they were instilled in them. And they were very clean. My dad always worked, put food on the table, a roof over our heads to make sure that our wants and needs were met. But when I went to the sanatorium, it was so different from when you're in your own home. Your parents are gone, and there's other little kids just like me that were whisked away. And there was physical abuse there too. They would put you in straitjackets and beat you, or else if you weren't in a straitjacket, they would still hit you. But when my mother and my aunties, they used to come and visit, and my uncles and dad would come and visit every 2 weeks, and my mother would bring a lot of gifts. And whatever they gave me, I shared with the other kids, because that's the way we are taught all the time, to always share, especially with those that don't have anything. So my mother said, "Where are your stuff?" So I told her, I said, a nurse came in and she beat me and she took all that stuff. And so my mother never said a word, but I never saw that nurse again, and all my things were returned. You see, with my mother, Nobody else was allowed to strike us or to do anything. If any disciplining had to happen with us, she would do it. And this happened at the elementary school where my sister went. She came home with her arms bloody because the teacher had scratched her really bad. So my mother disappeared for a little while, and then she came home. But and that was the good part about my mom, that, you know, she always spoke up for us. And the teachings, when we did something wrong, we were taught to sit and really contemplate and put ourselves in the other person's shoes. How our negative behavior impacted them. Because they would say, how would you feel like if that happened to you? And that's how I learned to be good. Because they never hit you. They just talk to you in that way so that we would change our behavior. There were times when my mother would hit and that would be over and done with. So then we wouldn't have to really think about our behavior and how we hurt someone. I preferred that one than the other one was harsh, because you end up crying, feeling bad because you wouldn't want to go through what they did. And we'd get a hug after, and they'd say, oh, that's okay, you're going to learn. You're going to learn. And got our kiss, and away we went to do it again. To be young. And you know, we were taught that when somebody is fighting you verbally, that you need to walk away. So how do you do that as a young child? How do you save face by walking away? Somebody calls you a coward. But we had to learn how to do that, and that was tough. So as you get older, you know how important these teachings are, because that other person's hurting. So you don't want to go to that level and try and hurt them some more. They're hurting enough as it is. So, you know, we learn to just walk away. And then when something happens and you're hurt and the person says you're sorry, well, then you need to accept that too, eh? Yeah. So I love both my parents. They had a hard upbringing, but they never spoke about it. But they did the best they could with the tools in their hands. And what I learned when I went to the sanatorium, even with the dentist, he had to pull my tooth, and I had to hang on to the chair because he was just lifting me up, trying to pull my tooth out. Well, that's not a good experience to have. But you know, the lessons you learn when you're in situations like that is not to treat another human in that manner, and to do the best that you can to get along with one another. And those are the teachings, to be kind, loving, and compassionate, and to always be honest, no matter how hard, difficult it is, eh? And to tell your truth, and to be fair with one another, because you know we need to live together as a family, and then with relatives, how they get you to interact with other people in a good way, and then with the school, and then the whole community. So along with the bad came the good too. But when you get physically abused or sexually abused, that's so traumatizing. And if you see a friend get killed, Or else if there's a fire and the nuns or the priests won't let the young people out that are locked up in the room and they let them burn, well, that's traumatizing too. So we have a lot of work to do with our people. And to always look at the good. And the rest of society, they're very sympathetic to other countries. If something devastating happens, well then they really come forward 100%. But because this is our land, and this is where we come from, people are very ambivalent. And they say, well, you can get over it. And that's what my friend said. Well, you need to get over it. I said, how would you like someone to rape your daughter day in and day out? And you tell her to get over it. Or somebody murder your cousin or your friend, eh? And she just didn't get it. Finally, her husband had to shut it down. And forced to live on a reserve and not to be able to go anywhere. Well, people are complaining of COVID, right? They can't do this, they can't do that. Well, they should have come and lived with us a long time ago. And because it was so unjust. And what we need to do is we need to turn things around, and we need to live together. All nations need to live together. And good things come out of it. To accept each other's differences and to be fair and honest and giving to one another. So to always, always look after the ones that have nothing to weigh. Because they're there for a reason. We all have different places in life, but we're all equal. The street people, we're not any better than they are. And the billionaires, they're not any better than anyone else here. They just have a little more money, that's all. No other nation has a business in telling us how Indian we are or how Indian we're not. We do not interfere with any other nation to say, you're not enough French. They dictate that they say that this is Quebec and the rest of Canada. Well, they're on treaty land. That does not belong to them. They're just there visiting. Like everyone here on earth, we're visitors here on earth. We don't own her. We don't own the water. And during this time of COVID, is we need to sit and contemplate our behavior towards the earth and the water. And until we wake up and smell the coffee, it's going to be the same old, eh? Yeah. And it's simple. It's so simple. It's just that there's no money in it. People can't make billions and billions of dollars out of it. And that's not what we were meant to do when we came down here. We were meant to come here to help each other out, to make this place the best place that can be. The truth is ugly, but we can change it. We can change it by acknowledging everything that happened. And how can we, as Canada, come together, all nations? How can we all come together and make this right for all people. First, for the Indigenous people, this is our territory, and for the newcomers, because Canada is the best country to be in, and it's all Indigenous. We were here for a long time. The way our beginning stories are told, we've been here for a very, very, very long time. And we share everything. And there was a prophecy that said, a Hopi prophecy that said, when the eagle lands on the moon and the rock comes back, we're going to wake up, and it'll look bad. And it does look bad because of the addictions to drugs, alcohol, to gambling, to violence, to you name any abuse, to all that, hey? And when that spaceship went to the moon, that little rocket that came out and landed on the moon, it was called the Eagle. And they brought back rock samples. And that was the time when we were going to wake up. And take our rightful place in society, because there's a sacred song that sings about it, that tells us to wake up. It's time to wake up now from your deep sleep and start walking on that road and being recognized for who we are as Indigenous people. You know, if we could all do that, and to do no harm, where just like missing and murdered women, you know, for our women, all women, to be able to have skills to rear their children in a good way, and to because we had a coming out ceremony for little ones. When they were 2, you'd observe them, because then you would know their name, and then you would know what their path was. When I was small, I knew my path, but a lot of our people didn't. There's a lot of trauma. It's just the total opposite now. So we have to mend that hoop. Canada and First Nations need to come together and mend that hoop that got broken a long time ago. And then we need to mend that hoop with our children and our grandchildren, and to bring them back home. They need to know who they are, where they come from, their purpose in life, and the path that they're going on. That is so important, to have a good and strong human being that will do no harm. What I hope for the future, for our community and for all communities around the world, is that we help each other out. Wherever it's needed, and that we're not afraid to ask for help. That when you see someone out there hungry, it's to come together and do that. We have our women's jail here, and there's too many of us in the system. Same with the penitentiary and the provincial jail. And what I hope to see is that all the people that work there will work themselves out of a job. And I want that for all people. For all people. Because when somebody hurts somebody by raping them, going into gangs, murder, stealing, home invasions, all those things, there's a cause and effect, eh? Things have happened somewhere in their lives. Sometimes that interference happens when the baby's in the mother's womb. So, because if a woman is in an abusive relationship, any woman, cross-culture, if you get beaten while you're pregnant, your child is getting beaten too. So when you're terrified, that baby's terrified too. So whether it happens in the womb or mental illness or whatever, that's the end result. Those kids, young kids that are in gangs, they want a sense of belonging. They want an identity, and they're going about it the wrong way. We need to make our men strong. All men. So that they don't violate women through physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual abuse. So we have to work in concert with one another. And, I've never met this young person. He was a street kid living under a bridge, but he never missed school. I would have opened my home for him, but he's in Saskatoon. So, at no cost to him. Mm-hmm. Just as long as he got an education and was able to become independent and to be able to earn a living in a good way. That's what I'd like to see.
Thank you, Florence, for your powerful words. Up next, we have Chief Jonathan Bergen from the Prince Albert Police Service.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Bergen, Chief of Police with the Prince Albert Police Service. I join many others as we work to create a more welcoming and inclusive community, free from discrimination. And it's with our members who serve on Treaty 6 territory, which is homeland of the Métis, that we do this work. Today, on National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, I am reflecting. I'm reflecting on the tragic and long-term effects of residential schools and the impact they had on our entire country. This is a tragedy that still affects many people in our community and our entire region. Prince Albert is home to many Indigenous groups, and I'm fortunate to be able to keep learning about our community's history from Indigenous leaders and all those who share their knowledge and experience with me. As a police service, we join our community in mourning those who suffered trauma, abuse, neglect in residential schools. And of course, all those who never came home. We support these families who struggle with this pain and loss. And on National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, we join others in reflecting on the trauma caused by these residential schools. This is an important time. It's a time for education, which will lead to understanding. As Chief of Police, I continue to work to participate in a meaningful way so that I can become better informed and so that our organization can do more to meet the needs of those in our community. Our police service is part of the community, and we know that we have the responsibility to keep listening and keep learning so that we can move forward together in a positive and respectful way. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this video message as we recognize and reflect on National Day for Truth and Reconciliation.
We will now be hearing from Councillor Tony Head from Ward 3 in the City of Prince Albert.
Hello, my name is Tony Head and I'm a City Councillor in Ward 3 in the City of Prince Albert. I'm honored to be a part of this virtual event today hosted by the Prince Albert's Urban Indigenous Coalition. I was asked to answer 2 questions. What does truth and reconciliation mean to me? Truth and reconciliation has been a part of our vocabulary for the past 13 years. The work on the Commission was to listen to the stories of Indigenous peoples who suffered under rules and laws built upon the settlers' presumption that Indians were less than and uncivilized. The Commission listened to hundreds, if not thousands, of stories of people forced into a system that was intentionally designed to deliberately, forcefully kill the Indian and the child. These schools left a legacy of trauma that is still felt to this day. And I can say this is something we can't just get over. The Commission's 94 calls to action are an attempt to build a bridge between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of this country. It is an attempt to guide a path of change with the many flawed systems which are the foundation of our society. We need to acknowledge that systematic racism does exist, and those who disagree with me are not ready to hear the truth, and are definitely not on the path of reconciliation. Indigenous peoples need to have a fair seat at the table. We need to be viewed on an equal playing field, and we need to have mutual respect and understanding. To follow this path would mean to fix the systems that continue to oppress Indigenous people. We've all heard the truth. Now we must accept it. We must accept that the stories that my people told are our shared history. When we teach our children about the history of Canada, we can no longer leave out the truth. It is time to have these uncomfortable conversations. It is time to acknowledge Canada's dark past. We must accept that this polite, freedom-loving, beautiful country that we like to take such pride in has a dark history. This is truth. Once we understand and accept the truth, then reconciliation can begin to happen. Part of reconciliation is about making sure that it never happens again. It's about moving forward together without ever leaving anyone behind. It means taking the 94 calls to action and collectively recognizing that if we truly want a country to be proud of, if we truly want to leave our past behind, then implementing them is the only way forward. What I would like to see come out of the truth and reconciliation is that all levels of government, federal, provincial, municipal, and Indigenous governments collectively come together for meaningful change. In order for this to happen, we must do away with the promises, we must push back the soapboxes, and we must work together to ensure the systems and policies that were meant to hold us back no longer hinders our progress. Reconciliation is also an individual pursuit. What reconciliation means to you and what it means to me is going to be different, and that's okay. I encourage all members of our community to learn about the dark time in Canada's history and to educate others as well. I honestly believe education is the key to reconciliation. We need our school system to teach our children about the past and not to gloss over the truth. We need our future leaders to be well informed so they are better equipped to make decisions that benefit all members of society. I would like to leave you with the wise words of Justice Murray Sinclair. Reconciliation must inspire Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples to transform Canadian society so that our children and grandchildren can live together in dignity, peace, and prosperity on these lands we now share. Together is the path forward, my friends. Hi, hi.
We have heard from survivors and community members about what truth and reconciliation means to them. Now we want to hear from you.
On behalf of our community partners, we ask, what can we do as a community to take action and work towards truth and reconciliation in our community? Thank you for taking the time to listen to the stories. We encourage you to continue to listen and learn from those in our community.